Single while salute, I'm Lord Matre, the hip hop futurist. You're now tuned into the Super Longevity Institute podcast. This evening, I have a very special guest. He was born and raised in Brooklyn. In the 80s, he photographed many aspects of New York City youth culture. The streets and subway system became the backdrops for many of his photographs. In his bio on his website, it says his goals was to contribute to the preservation of world culture and history. He has over 24 solo exhibitions: Men of Honor, Time Before Crack, Pieces of Man, Represent, When Two Worlds Meet, Back in the Days and Seconds of My Life, which has been shown from Argentina to the Netherlands, England, Italy, Germany, France, Japan, and throughout the United States. Some of his work was displayed at the Art Basel Miami, the Brooklyn Museum, the Newark Museum, the Contact Festival, the Victoria and the Albert Museum, the Studio Museum in Harlem, Duke University, and the Adidas Photo Festival in Ethiopia. That sounds crazy right there. I got to ask you about that. He has volunteered working with a wide range of organizations centered on inspiring young people in the field of photography and social responsibility. He has been teaching artists with the Rush Philanthropic Arts Foundation. He has lectured at the Fashion Institute of Technology, the International Center for Photography, the Brooklyn Historic Foundation, Hartford College, and Parsons New School of Design. He is also the author of 5 monograms. Ladies and gentlemen, hip hop futurist, transhumanist worldwide, the Alchemist, Jamel Shabazz.
Peace,
Yo,
Lord.
I hope I did you proper, man, because I am honored to have you here, man. For real, man. I really respect your work. Thank you for all your years of dedicated service to our community, my brother. Police and blessings, man. Thank you for coming. I really mean that, man.
Well, thank you so much for those
Seriously.
words. I appreciate the words from the bottom of my heart, and I appreciate the platform that you created to illuminate light on different artists. So thank you so much for the invitation to participate in this build session
Wow.
with you.
If somebody would say, yo, you're going to have Jamel Shabazz on the show in like 5 years, I would have said, get out of here, man. You bugging. I mean, yo, let me tell you, man. What inspired you to become a photographer?
I think growing up in the 1960s, there was a lot going on in the country. We had the war in Vietnam, we had the civil rights movement. And what really informed me of what was happening were the publications. You spoke earlier about reading and the library. And for me, I spent a lot of time trying to understand what was going on in the world. My parents weren't really bringing it to my attention. I wasn't being taught in school. So I found the library was where all the lies were buried. So as a very
Mm,
young age, about 9, 10 years old, I spent a lot of time looking at various publications such as Life Magazine, National
yeah.
Geographic, Ebony, Jet Magazine, and a host of other publications that kind of like informed me of what was going on both in the country and around the world. And at that
Mm,
point, I saw the value of photography. That powerful visual language to convey messages of what was happening. So
mm,
early on, I drew an interest in photography before I even physically picked up a camera. So for many years, I just looked at images. In addition to the fact
wow.
that my father was a professional photographer, who was always
Wow.
out there making images, and he had a vast library within his home. So I would
Wow.
constantly look at his photo books and get a gauge on what was happening around me. And the seeds were being planted at that very early age. It wasn't until I was about 15 years old where I physically picked up a camera that my mother had, and I would just take that to my local junior high school and photograph my peers. And at that point, it gave me a voice. It's like something magical happened when I looked through that viewfinder. I was able to
Mm,
like now see through a third eye, and I was seeing things very differently. And it gave me a voice. It allowed me an opportunity now to engage people. Whereas without the
mm,
camera, there was really no engagement. But once I had the camera,
mm,
it gave me a purpose in life. And that camera almost became like a compass that put me in a particular path, and it gave me a voice, that I've been on
mm.
now for over 45 years. So my early
Wow.
beginnings came at the age of about 15 years old.
I think I seen that. Were you in the service also?
Yes, I was. I enlisted in the military at the age of 17.
Wow.
as a form of escape, to get away from New York at a time when a lot of our parents were divorcing
Yeah.
and we had an imbalance in our life. So I decided to join the military to get structure and get away from New York.
Mm. Where's some of the places did you leave New York
I
when
did
you was
leave
in the
New York.
service?
And I traveled overseas. I was stationed in Germany for 3 years. So at
Wow.
17 years old, it was first time leaving the country, and it was a very important assignment to go on. Mind you, I'm
Mm.
going into a country that was in two major wars, and during the 1970s was a very interesting time in American history. But it was a destination I needed to be at. My
Mm.
uncles were there prior to me, and I was very interested about the history and culture because I read about the wars that took place. I had an understanding of Hitler and the Nazi Party. So I
Mm.
wanted to see things for myself out of curiosity. So it was very interesting to be at a country that was at war with America during that time period where the German soldiers that fought in World War II were pretty much in the early 50s. So it was an
Wow.
experience that I appreciate going, having a chance to go, because being in the military is a whole subculture. It's beyond what anyone could ever imagine. You're dealing with a space with brothers and sisters from around the country and people from around the
Yeah.
country,
Mm.
from the North, from the South, from the Midwest, from all the various places in America and outside America as well. You got people from Hawaii, you got people from Guam. So it gave me an opportunity to see people from other cultures. And,
Wow.
and that was a very important experience for me, to just be on my own at 17 years old,
Mm.
to have steady income and to be able to explore another society while gaining discipline and knowledge.
Wow. Did you film any of that experience? Were you into photography around that time? Did you?
I wasn't really into photography at that point, to my
Mm-hmm.
regret. One of the things that I really got deep into at that time was music. Music culture was
Mm.
big in Germany, because at
Yeah.
that, during that time period, you can get the stereo equipment at the local post exchange, and
Mm.
stereo was everything, So it was about really getting stereo equipment, getting albums, and that's what I was more into. I invested a lot of time in really two things: in building up my musical collection and building up my library, because I left high school early on when I was in America. So I understood the importance of utilizing that time when I'm in the military to gain higher education. So when I wasn't
Mm.
making music and I wasn't in the field, I was spending a lot of time in the library educating myself. One thing about my particular base, they had a lot of really powerful black books over there. And
Oh
I was
wow.
introduced to the black arts movement. I was introduced to George Jackson, Angela Davis,
Mm.
Soledad Brothers, and so much, by just reading a lot. I read a whole lot because we had time. So when I wasn't
Mm.
making music, I was just reading a lot of books on Black history and culture.
Wow. That's interesting. And I know Germany, as a country, I know that hip hop is really big in Germany, just as big as in Japan. But I
But
know,
what's interesting that people don't know, what's very important about how it got big in those countries was because of American soldiers.
yeah.
Because of
Wow.
American soldiers that brought it over there. Because when we had our clubs on base, what you call it, EM's club and the Enlisted Man Club, or
Wow.
NCO club, a non-commissioned officers club, German civilians would come on the base and they would party with American soldiers, thus being introduced to the music, and they embraced the culture.
Wow.
So both, if you look at the two countries that have a large population of hip hop, of people embracing hip hop, it's areas where you had large populations of American soldiers, in addition to Korea, which is
Yeah.
really into b-boying. So it's due in part, really, it's due mainly to American soldiers, both Army and Air Force and Marines, that brought the culture to those distant lands.
That's crazy. You know that history is not really known like that. You just blew my mind just now. And you know what's deep? Wow, that's so true, man. You know that, and I know you know this part of history that, that chant, the hip hop as a word is they were making fun of what you call it? What's his name? That was down with the Grandmaster Flash and the
Right,
Furious
right, right.
Five.
Hip,
He passed away. Yeah, hip hop was like he was making fun of
it,
because he
it,
was coming back home from the army.
yeah, it's a cadence.
It's a
You know,
cadence.
so it's when you march, it's a cadence.
Yeah, that's wow. That's
So
crazy,
the, the,
man.
the, the relationship to hip hop and the military is very profound. Even when I heard Rappers of Life for the first time, I heard it in Germany. I was introduced to hip hop really in terms of vinyl in Germany. To this
Wow.
day, I still have my reel to reel tapes of some of the early hip hop tapes that I made over there, because we would get the albums and we would put them on reel to reel. So I remember, like I said, Rappers Delight, Super Sperm, uh, um, so much back in those days, and I still have to this very day. That I made in like 1978, 1979. So it was a big movement. It got a slow start over there at first because the military is predominantly made up of people from the southern states. So back
Mm,
then, funk was really heavy music back in that time. But it's
mm.
when Rappers Alike came out, it became a phenomenal on throughout American bases all over. Because what would happen? American soldiers would go home on leave and get the vinyls and bring them back, or bring mixtapes back, and they would be jamming in the club. So that's pretty much how it came to play. And then
Wow.
people like myself, I would borrow albums from my partners and put them on reel to reel and make my own personal mixtapes.
Oh, you had a reel to reel? We had one too, man. Reel to reels is something. I wish I had one now. I wish we still had that reel to reel. I mean,
Yeah, I still
record it right now on the reel to reel.
need all of that. So I still got my reel. It's out of commission now, but
What?
I had it since '78. And I
Wow.
got some stuff on. So I'm gonna buy me another one because I got some really classic music over there. When I was in
Whoa.
my zone, because back then it'd take about 6 hours to make a reel. So back in those days, we'd have some time to ourselves. We would go borrow albums from different brothers in various rooms and build up a nice collection, and just put some time aside and just put it in. And put about
Wow.
6 hours in to make some master tapes. So I got the Royers, I got the Lonnie Liston Smith, I got Gene Khan, I got Chic, I got Shaka Khan, Phyllis Hyman, a little bit of everybody on my reels, but they were very popular back in those days.
Wow. Oh wow, that's incredible. I know you like the archivist over there, man. I mean, you remind me of those guys. I remember I was watching the thing on the I was watching what was it was a documentary, and they was in the Vatican, and the guys came out, they had white gloves on. You remind me of one of those guys, yo. They had white gloves. They had an article. It was like mad delicate. They came out. They had white gloves. It was in a carbonated room. They were like this. It was a letter from Lincoln. It was like, yeah. It was like, this is the first time you was able to go down into the archivist chamber to see all of the to go in the archives of the Pope. It was crazy. You like an archivist too, man.
Yeah,
I can imagine.
I've been collecting material for many years right now. I have a lot. I mean, from photographs to letters to books to magazines. I've just collected. I've traveled extensively throughout my life, and I built up a pretty good collection. That's very important right now because it serves as a historic document. So
Mm.
one of the things I'm just striving to do right now is make sure this work gets into different museums. That's why I'm
Mm.
constantly doing exhibitions and donating work and having institutions purchase work because I've amassed a whole lot. I just had the insight to preserve history and culture. And not only those items, but even clothes. I got the old Bally shoes from back in the days. I got the Gazelle.
Whoa.
I got a lot of old classic clothes from the '70s that I just can't get rid of because I understood that they have great value to them. So, my objective in life was just to preserve history and culture. I really take that to heart. It's beyond photography.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of everything that I'm trying to preserve right now.
Yeah.
Even the oral history, various conversations I've had with people that are very relevant to things that are going on that we need to know. That oral history has to be passed on from generation to generation. So
Yes.
I've always been one that's had an inquisitive mind, and I wanted to know because it was deeper than just taking images. I wanted to know
Yes.
who the people I was focusing. I had themes in mind. I've had conversations with pimps and prostitutes. I grew up during the Vietnam War. I wanted to better understand that war from the perspective of people that fought in it. So I went out my way to talk to a number of Vietnam veterans and not only talk to them, but transcribe those conversations on paper, in hopes that, in a book project down the road, I could bring out these conversations and bring them back to life. So again, I'm just trying to continue on the path for those who came before me, those documentarians and archivists, this sort of value in making sure our history is preserved. Because tragically,
Mm.
COVID and through death and through people losing their homes, a lot of this information is being lost.
Yeah.
And one of the reasons that really motivated me to do it was when I had an uncle that had a massive archive of images from his time of growing up in the South and his time being in the military. He had no children. And when he was ill, I was trying to connect with him to get that stuff because I knew it was very important. It was family history. And his wife refused, and she eventually died. My uncle died, and she died. That stuff went to the curb, and so much history was lost. So I promised myself I would never let that happen ever again. So I'm going to start with myself, and I'm going to encourage others to preserve the history at the same time too. So I've documented the majority of my life, and I'm very fortunate that with my father's collection, I have a lot of his photographs dealing with our family history. Same with my mother. I have our history going back to the 1800s. So it's
Wow.
very important, not only for me, but for everyone to hold on to that family history so it could be passed on from generation to generation. Because again, a lot of it is being lost right now. You can find stuff on the curb. You can find stuff at the Salvation Army, these different thrift shops, because there's no one to pass them on to. And then you have others that don't see the value of it. So much of our history and culture is being lost, over the decades. And that really saddens me. And I don't want that to happen with me. That's why I'm so
Wow.
adamant in using my social media platforms to get
Yeah,
information out to the
I seen
universe.
that.
I feel it doesn't belong to me, it belongs to the people.
Wow. Yeah, and I know how important that is. Um, did you see the in the news that the hip hop museum is open? They're building a hip hop museum in the Bronx.
Yes, indeed, indeed. And that's a great endeavor.
Yeah, yeah. I hope that if y'all listening, y'all definitely reach out to the brother Jamel Shabazz, because he's he's a treasure in our community as far as the archives he has. I hope y'all definitely reach out to the brother Jamel Shabazz, please. I don't know in what capacity, but y'all please holler at him, because you're gonna the brother just dropped knowledge in the first 10 minutes of this interview. And well, I know that. How do you remember? I know your archives are so. How do you categorize all of the negatives and stuff? I know. How do you find stuff in your archives when you want to print a when you, let's say if you want to do a new project? How do you find stuff?
Well, the good thing about it, I have a number of photo albums. I have like hundreds upon hundreds of albums of just images. I mean, even behind me, there's just a bunch of albums. So
Wow.
I structure things in albums strategically according to the years,
Hmm.
and then I do it according to themes as well. There's an album with hats in it. There's an album with glasses. There's an album with boom
Mm.
boxes. There's albums with trains, and the same with the
Mm.
negatives. I'm going through my archive right now because I have all of my negatives. So I'm just organizing them in a similar fashion. Then I have the books. The purpose of producing the books is to get the work out there at the same time too. Because once the work is in a book, then I can put that body of work to the side. And
Yeah.
that's one of my motivations for wanting to do books, because now I can take these images, put them in the book, and share them to a larger audience, and then take the negatives of the files that produce the books and put them to the side. So the whole idea of producing books is a part of my archival process at the same time too. So that's one of my motivations for trying to keep books out there. In addition to doing a number of exhibitions, because when I do exhibitions, it allows me an opportunity to share to a larger audience, and at the same time, in working with museums, donate a lot of those shows to those institutions. So those are some
Wow.
of the methods in which I utilize to make sure that my work is preserved.
I can imagine how many negatives you might have of subway carts from the 80s, or just the subways period.
I was, I rode the trains a lot, and I liked them in terms of photographic reasons, because during the cold months, you get on the train and be warm.
Yeah.
A lot of what you saw above ground, you saw below ground in terms of the people. And what was good about the trains, they couldn't really move away from you. Where if you were on the street, people were in motion for the most part. But I found
Mm.
I get on the train, I used to walk car to car looking for people to photograph. So now I get on the car, people sitting down. It was, believe it or not, it was easier to approach them and engage them,
Mm.
versus a person on the street. So I would ride the trains a lot. I like the lighting on the trains, available light, and not only on the trains, but the subway platforms itself. So it was
Mm.
never a dull moment, taking the train from Brooklyn to 42nd Street at night. It was always something going on between the people on the train. You had the homelessness, you had the conductors. There was always something going on in trains in New York. And we talk about a system that's open 24 hours. So
Mm.
I spent a lot of time, on the subways documenting that world. And just for me, I had no idea that one day it would mean so much, or those graffiti tags that I saw in those trains back then would
Mm.
mean so much later on, because a lot of those individuals that had those tags went on to be renowned. And
Mm.
there's times I may not have even noticed it, because back then all the trains had graffiti on it. So
Yeah.
here I'm photographing a couple on the train, but meanwhile you got a tag in the background,
Wow.
of Lee, or the Fabulous Five,
Wow.
or James, or folks like that, which would be in the background. People like Sharp. I really never paid attention to that because it was so common. But after 20, 30 years, Now that work is published, I got people saying, yo, that's me on the back. That's my cousin over he's no longer here. So those tags now have so much more meaning that I would never have even imagined when I first started out. And I'm glad that I documented it because it means so much today.
Wow. What was you thinking about when you dropped that book, A Time Before Crack? What was the idea that what was the passion behind that? Why did you make that book?
It was anger because I witnessed firsthand the impact that the crack epidemic had on my community. It was devastating, and that hurt me. And I didn't want people to forget it. I wanted people to know that there was a time before crack. There was a time period in which we as a people were really working to get things together. See, I come from a generation I like to call the Roots generation. January of 1977, the miniseries Roots came on television, national television, and it caused a transformation almost overnight. It gave us a glimpse of who we were as a people. It introduced us to the transatlantic slave trade. It gave us insight and understanding that we never got in school. And at the same time, it caused us to rethink who we were as a people, and it caused a rebirth amongst people of my generation. We came into a sense of consciousness, and we did it together. It was a time period in which, when Roots came out, it seemed like the gangs that existed in New York dissipated overnight, and people started to become conscious. They became members of the 5% Nation. They became members of the Zulu Nation. They became they participated in different conscious organizations because now they have a sense of who they were. And they understood the hardships of slavery and what it did to us as a people. So we were trying to regain our identity. So it was a time that we referred to each other as brothers and sisters. There's a mutual respect going on the street where you could see a brother walk on the street and say, how's the brother? And he would speak back to you. You could see a sister call her sister, and she embraced that. We called each other kings. And it was a really good time. So we were really getting it together. The music was conscious at that time. We had Marvin Gaye, we had the Ozzy Brothers, we had Earth, Wind, and Fire, and they were saying things. We had a combination of songs that dealt with issues that were existing, but we also had love songs. So we had a really good balance, and we were really getting things together. And then AIDS came, and crack came, and it transformed everything. Brothers that were once who had great promise were going to college fell victim to crack. Sisters that had goals and objectives fell victim to crack. Young men that were trying to get into the workforce saw a greater opportunity selling crack than working a 9-to-5. And I witnessed this firsthand decimate my community. And it pained. And mind you now, we had an AIDS epidemic and a crack epidemic, and then we had a war on drugs. So it was a very difficult time coming up back then. Guns came back into fruition. The 40 ounce of alcohol was introduced. The music started to change. We started calling ourselves niggas. We started referring to our women as bitches and hoes. And it troubled me. So the idea of doing a time before crack was to remind people that before crack hit, we were very different. And not to say that we didn't have any problems, that it was a perfect society, because it wasn't. But there was a time that we were coming into a consciousness. And even with early hip hop, before we even called it hip hop, it was called dropping science, where a brother get on the microphone and he had dropped science about what was going on in the world. You know what I mean? He'd deal with actual facts and solar facts, things that were very relevant. And it was very popular in the early 80s to represent the red, black, and green. And then once that crack came, everything changed. So I was angry behind that. It disturbed me what had happened to our people. I was pained by what happened to our women, and women got hit the hardest, in terms of how they fell victim to it on a sexual level, how they were exploited. Crack babies were born. Mass incarceration was on the rise. Families were dismantled. Kids were placed in foster care. And we slipped back into darkness. And it was a very difficult time. So my book was really designed to create a form of visual medicine to help with the healing process. Those sisters that fell victim to crack. Now, as you turn through the pages of my book, you see a photograph of yourself when you were young and beautiful, before you were addicted. That brother who is now doing 30 years in prison, he's flipping through the pages of my book, and he sees a photo of himself when he's at his prime before he fell victim to drugs. So it was designed to revisit that conversation, because we have forgotten. The crack epidemic started to fade away, and we started to look at all the problems of society, but we didn't look at what the causes was. And when you really get into the essence of the crack epidemic, how did crack get into our country? Where did these guns come from? Why was all this killing taking place? What fostered the war on drugs and who was being impacted by the war on drugs? And then looking at the disparities between those arrested for cocaine versus crack cocaine. I watched it destroy my community, so I had to lend my voice. I had to be proactive and address this issue in the way that I saw best. And I felt that the visual language of photography was the key because we lost our way. So when you look at my book, A Time Before Crack, you're seeing a spirit of brotherly love amongst the brothers. You're seeing brothers embracing each other. You're seeing brothers smiling. You're seeing sisters smiling. You're seeing women who are not over sexual like we see today. It's a very different day and time, So the idea of producing the book was to spark up conversation. And it's interesting we've been talking about because I felt personally that the book missed the point. I couldn't get writers to write about the crack epidemic. I was new to this here, so even with what I expressed was not where it needed to be. So recently I reached out to my publisher to revisit A Time Before Crack. So I'm doing a whole new version of Time Before Crack. For the most part, many of the same pictures will be in the book. There will be additional photographs, but now I have deep writers who are going to contribute to the book now. I have a former district attorney who's going to write in the book. I have a former homicide detective who's going to write in the book. I have a young man and a young woman that were addicted to crack going to write in the book. And I have a former dealer going to write in the book to give the book greater substance now. Because the images is one thing to stimulate thought, but I think it's imperative to have the written words, essays in there to speak about how life was before crack and the impact that crack had on different levels. So I'm very, very excited with the idea of the book coming back out again. Wow. So hopefully this fall it will be out, A Time Before Crack, a new version. Wow. And it's a very important conversation we have to revisit. My first book back in the days did very well. It went into 8, 9 editions. Time Before Crack just came out. It was just one edition. It came out and it disappeared. So there's been a great demand about that. And a lot of people really want to know, what is this about? It's a provocative title. Even when I came up with the idea of producing a book, I played around with titles because titles are everything for me.
Yeah,
the initial idea was a book called Strictly Old School. And it's a great title, but I didn't want it to be based off style and poses and boom boxes and all that. I did that already. I wanted to produce a book that was going to provoke thought and really make people think. And we had to revisit a very painful conversation. Just now, as I watched the miniseries on FX, Snowfall, I'm so happy that there is a mini-series now giving greater insight on how crack was introduced in America on the West Coast. And this television series is really doing a great job showing how crack was introduced and the impact it had on the community. So I'm glad these conversations are coming back because we have to talk about that. Yeah. When we look at conditions about people today, we're in a really bad place. Mental illness is the order of the day.
Yeah.
We have so many people that got arrested during the crack epidemic and did 10, 20, 30 years. Coming home and losing everything. And now you're in a prison system where you were traumatized behind that. I mean, just think about being incarcerated for that amount of time and what it does to you, how it impacts your soul. And now you're coming home to nothing because oftentimes you're coming home and your parents are no longer here. You know what I mean? Your community has changed. And now you're coming home depressed. You're already suffering PTSD from incarceration, and now you're being released to nothing with a felony. And crack oftentimes was the cornerstone of a lot of that. People who fell victim to crack really needed rehabilitation versus incarceration. You know what I mean? The laws was send them away from prison, lock them up, throw away the key. Where they needed help. You know what I mean? They really needed help. We don't know what the conditions that created that type of situation that made a person want to get high. We don't know the trauma that they went through before. When we think about post-slave slave syndrome and the hearts our ancestors had to go through, and even coming up in the 1930s, the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, we were already suffering from PTSD. So oftentimes alcohol and drugs served as that form of self-medication that helped us with the healing process. So when crack came out, it was affordable. And people fell victim to it, and it gave them that escape. And the laws came down hard on people that were using it, and they didn't really care. And now we could look back now and say, you know what? We made a bad mistake. The war on drugs is a bad mistake. Meanwhile, so many people fell victim to that system, their lives were ruined. You know what I mean? And when you look at the crack epidemic, those areas that were hit hardest by crack were the same areas that a few years afterwards became gentrified. So now you look at neighborhoods like
that's right.
Harlem
That's right.
and Bed-Stuy,
That's
and
right.
areas across Black America have now been gentrified, and those were areas during the crack years that nobody wanted to live in. So it's very interesting how it worked. And when you look at crack itself, look at the people that really profit off it. The drug dealers, for a moment, most cats that I know that sold drugs, they all eventually got busted. So at the end of the day, it didn't mean anything. But the ones that really profited were the police officers making arrests and getting overtime, the morticians that were burying the people. You know what I mean? They're the ones that really profited. At the end of the day, we lost.
Wow.
You know, you think about parents that own homes that got smoked out and couldn't pay the mortgage no more. You know what I mean? Or the foundation of the family gets locked up, and now you got to give up your apartment, your home. Nobody talked about that. Crack did that. Crack really destroyed a lot of good people. I was speaking to a friend of mine earlier, and she spoke about. I was speaking about this young woman who I knew who fell victim to crack, but she wanted to tell me not only did she fall victim to crack, but her mother was a crackhead first.
Wow.
Who fell victim to crack and eventually died of AIDS.
Generation.
So it affected families. And it's a cross-generational thing, because a lot of these kids coming up today who were born to a mother addicted to crack, they imagine what they had to see. Right. You know what I mean? And other ones that were placed in group homes and foster homes because they were being taken away by social services. Look at the impact. Look at what they've gone through. I know a brother, I would see him on the street occasionally, and he would say the same story to me all the time. My mother took me and my sister to a project and just left us there. Wow. What kind of mother will do that? Now, this young man was in his early 20s. He was traumatized behind the experience. And more than likely, he went into foster care early on, and he could not understand, how could my mother do that to me? Think about the children that were sexually abused by individuals that the mother wanted to engage in sexually, and she offered up her children. I had a young man, because I worked in the jail for 20 years. I had a young man who wanted to commit suicide, and he was adamant about killing himself. Here I got this young, vibrant young man who looked like he had a lot of future ahead of him, and he wanted to kill himself. Wow. And when I asked him, brother, why you want to kill yourself for? He said, well, my mother's boyfriend raped me, and when I told her, not only did he rape me, but I got AIDS. And when I told my mother, she threw me out the house. Wow. And when he told me that broke my heart, brother. And that's just one story. And there's endless stories of kids being abused, from parents or loved ones who fell victim to crack. And nobody talks about that. So going back to your question about why I did the book A Time Before Crack, it was a very needed conversation. And I'm not stopping at the book, the new book, because in order to really convey a message and give people a broader understanding of the epidemic, I am working with great diligence to do a mini-series on one of the cable networks under the same title of A Time Before Crack. Wow. In hopes that I could take this idea to the big screen and offer a counter narrative to programs like Snowfall or The Wire or The Corner. Yeah. We see in those movies, The Wire and The Corner in particular, the impact that heroin and crack had in our community. But for me personally, we need to rewind a little bit, and let's talk about the 1970s. Yeah. We got to talk about that time period. Nobody talks about the 70s. The war in Vietnam was still going on. There's a lot happened in the 1970s. There was still school segregation going on up north in places like Boston. So I want to go back to A Time Before Crack in the form of a miniseries to give people a visual understanding on how life was from my perspective based off the book.
Well, wow. I mean, I didn't even know that you was doing all this, and I think this is a wonderful idea. I would love to see this as a series. I hope there's some music, but I hope you do some music too, man. I hope y'all an album or some music. I hope you have some original music too, because I know you know a lot of artists and stuff, man. Or I know you know some talent, but this sounds like a great subject.
I want it to be a collaboration, of a number of people. I want a lot of people involved. I want Nas involved. I want Swiss Beats involved. I want Alicia Keys involved. I want an A-list of people to participate in this film. It's a long-term project, but it's necessary. So I think that the stepping stone for a project of that magnitude is the book. You do the book first. Yeah. And when A Time Before Crack, You can't go wrong. When I look at Snowfall now, the fact that it's a great series
Mm.
and it's an important series, I said, okay, it's time for mine. Again, no one has touched on that before, especially New York history. There's an interest in it in terms of the images,
Yeah.
but now imagine looking at A Time Before Crack and bringing all those characters to life, talking about who these people were. We like the fashion, we like the posing, we like the hairstyles and all that. Let me bring that back to life, and let me show you how it really was. You know what I mean? No twisted version. Coming from a person that was there. Because we need to understand. We need to know that at that time we weren't calling ourselves niggas. We need to know at that time that people weren't dying senselessly in the way in which they're dying today. We need to see what love looked like. We need to see brotherly love amongst brothers
Yeah.
embracing each other and loving each
Definitely need
other
to see
from
that.
the heart.
Yeah.
You know, so my objective is to use that platform of a mini series to address a wide range of issues. So that's what that's my major objective in life today.
What, let me just go back a little bit. Thank you for that. I'm glad you shared that with me. Definitely, I'm happy to hear that. I'm definitely gonna get my copy. When that drops. What was your first camera? Do you remember what your first camera was?
Well, the first camera I used was my mother's little cheap Kodak Instamatic camera, a
Wow.
little compact camera that you could fit in your pocket. It took between 24 shots,
Mm.
36. It was suitable for what I needed. It was point and shoot.
Mm.
Back in those days, I would photograph my peers. I did a pretty good job, and we would take it to the local drugstore to get the work processed. Me and my
Wow.
partner, my right hand man, we were shipping to buy the film, and we were chipping to get the film out, and I would split the pictures with him. So
Wow.
that first camera back then was a Kodak Instamatic. I had two of them, a 110 and a 126 camera.
Wow. 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 How did you? I know that somebody they made a character out. They made a character. In I think it was Luke Cage. They made one of the characters was based on you.
They got it twisted. I mean, I was honored that they thought to use me in there, but what they produced was
Mr.
not something.
Shabazz, moving the camera a little bit more. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I wanted people to see you, man. There you go. All right, thank you. Yeah.
But they had it wrong,
Hmm.
and that's not my process. That's not how I look. So I could look at it and it wasn't like I was happy with it because that's not how I operate. But somebody that was the interpretation of me. See, it's conversations like this that gives people a broader understanding of what I really represent because I don't.
Right.
That's not what it's about. Even
Right.
what I do itself, the work that I aspire to do in books like A Time Before Crack, it was beyond photographs. It was about connecting people and building.
Right.
That was my duty. I was on an assignment,
Right.
to engage people, to warn people the time that we were living in. See, I came up in a time we talk about Black Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter and all that. But when I was coming up, we had another saying, nation time.
Yeah.
It was
That's
nation
right.
time. It was time for us to get together and rise up as a people and come into consciousness. Stop killing each other and loving each other.
That's
So
right.
the camera was the compass that guided me to people to engage in conversation. You know what I mean? Because when I came home from the military, there's a war going on.
Yeah.
A lot of young men were killing other young men. And these are young men that I knew. I knew killers and victims. And there needed to be somebody to act as a mediator to try to inspire a spirit of brotherly love. And I felt that was my duty. So I was duty bound. I just happened to have a camera. The camera made it easier to engage people. See, without the camera, I could just have a conversation with you. But by having not only a camera, but by carrying a portfolio with me with images, now I could show you things. Because I came home and there was a lot taking place when I came home. I was dealing with a number of different groups of brothers. And unbeknownst to me, they were at war with each other. So on my block, there was a group of brothers that I was cool with. And I used to photograph and engage in conversation. But unbeknownst to me, the cats that would visit me later on in the afternoon had beef with those same brothers I did not know nothing about. They were the same age, lived in a same neighborhood, but just 6 months earlier or a year earlier, a year had passed when I was in the military, they had beef going on.
Wow.
I knew all parties involved. So they were all at war with each other, and I was a neutral person, and I didn't really find out until later on that they were arch enemies to each other.
Wow.
And then the guys that would come visit me in the afternoon, unbeknownst to me, that the crew I hung out with at night was looking to kill them. And I wasn't aware of that. And I knew all of these people. And I had a great relationship with all of them, photographed all of them, was able to engage them all individually. But again, I had no idea they were enemies to one another. And once
Wow.
I found out, it strengthened my determination to go out there and try to be a light.
Wow.
I had purpose. I just wasn't going out there just to be going.
Right.
You know what I
Right.
mean? I had a duty and responsibility to
Right.
speak to the brothers and sisters, to speak to the sisters about
Right.
eating right
That's right.
and being mindful of what you put in your system. You know what I mean? I
Yeah.
came home very conscious of my health. And I
Mm.
understood the impact that alcohol can have on you because of seeing it in my family. So I was trying
Mm.
to encourage people to be mindful of that 40 ounce of alcohol, that malt liquor, what it was doing to liver. You know what I mean? Being
Mm.
mindful of what you eat because as people of color, we are suffering from diabetes and high blood pressure. So we have to be conscious. We have to learn how to eat to live.
Right.
So I was
Right.
trying to engage people in conversations like that, speaking about the importance of education. I didn't want them to make the same mistakes I made. So
Mm.
I didn't have the guidance early on like I could have had that made me better. So now I
Mm.
want to be a big brother to people. And
Yeah.
the camera allowed me to freeze people for a few
Wow.
minutes. So as I got brothers and sisters posing up, I'm telling them they're kings and queens. I'm saying
Mm.
your future. I'm speaking about the importance of education, and everything you do today is going to reflect upon your future. So that those few seconds they stood in front of my camera, I used that to engage them whenever possible, and then build
Mm.
friendships with brothers. A lot of cats I didn't know at that time they were stick-up kids. They were
Wow.
involved in a particular light. They kept that away from me, but I was
Wow.
able to penetrate them at that time and have them look at things a little bit differently. And then some of them didn't, but there was a degree of mutual respect there. But that was my duty at that time. That's what it was all about.
Wow. Wow. Um. Why did you? Well, now I know why you call yourself an alchemist because I get it. I definitely get it.
I
Um.
freeze time and motion. When I come up with that, that's
Mm.
what I do. I'm
Right.
able to freeze time and motion. And what a
Mm.
beautiful ability to have. To see a moment,
Mm.
to have your subconscious mind lead you to a particular destination, utilizing the camera as a compass. And now you see something that it was meant to be. It was meant for me to see this.
Mm.
Something led me to this path here to see this image and pick up my camera and and freeze that moment in time. And then find out the meaning behind that. Same with this photograph right here. I saw a moment in my travels and I froze a moment in time, not realizing that 20, 30 years later, that one photograph will have a backstory to it beyond anything anyone could ever imagine. So
Wow.
when I look at myself as an alchemist, it's my ability to freeze time and motion. And now time passes, I'm able to throw out that frozen moment in time. And now it has so much meaning to it. I've taken
Mm.
photographs of children, 2, 3 years old, shared them on my social media platform. Now those children are reaching out to me in their 40s and saying, "That's me. You have a
Wow.
photograph of me. How did you get that picture? Let me tell you who I am." So that's why
Wow.
I look to share images on my social media feed every day because that is the perfect platform for me to locate people I've been trying to find over the many years. And every
Wow.
day people write me and say, "That's me. That's my mother. That's my father. That's my sister. That's my brother. That's my best friend. They're not here. Thank you so
Wow.
much for capturing this moment in time." So when I was making these images, I had no idea the impact that I was having at that time. It's through the technology and social media that my mission in life became more clearer to me, that I was put on this path for a reason, to be this alchemist, to be a preserver of history and culture at a time where it's more needed now than ever before,
Yeah.
because overall my work falls under the umbrella of visual medicine. So when I could
Mm.
work on different feeds and people say, "Brother, your photograph made my day today. Your picture made my heart smile."
Mm.
That means that I've done my job using this global language of photography. At the same time, for those that don't understand our people in this country, who might have gotten a distorted view on Black people in this country, through my journey in capturing honor and dignity, I could show them another side of Black people that they
Right.
never seen before, because
Better image.
oftentimes our image is compromised through the
Yeah.
media.
Yeah.
So when you look at my images, and it's a vast body of work. Not too long ago, I did an exhibition at the Gordon Parks Foundation, and I
I
decided
seen
to
that.
use the title "Honor and Dignity."
Yeah.
And it's very important for me to say honor and dignity. And I want to
Mm.
showcase the fathers, the mothers, the uncles, the grandfathers, the veterans, the police officers, the civil service workers that are often deemed invisible. I wanted to give them visibility and to have a show called Honor and Dignity, because too often my work is pigeonholed as hip hop, and that's
Mm,
not a bad thing, because
mm,
hip hop is a language within itself. But
mm,
my work goes beyond just hip hop. That is one
mm,
aspect of it. There's so much involved in my work. That's why on my Facebook page, I now put music attached to a photograph in my short stories. So now it
mm,
gives you a deeper understanding of what I'm trying to convey. Because I have a song that might go contrary to what you might have believed. Like, wow, I never thought that that song would go with that. What is he trying to
mm.
say? So music is a very important part of me trying to really deliver a message of what my work really
Wow.
represents.
Wow. Thank you for that. Wow. Oh, you had your photographer. Some of your photographs was in the Source magazine at one time too, right? Oh, in one of their issues.
Yeah, the Source gave me my one of my biggest starts. To be honest with you, that was back in like 1999.
Yeah.
Um, I just went there. You know, I went there one
Wow.
day with a portfolio because I was reading the Source. I believed in it. You know, it had really good stories, and I liked the fact that it was covering urban culture. But one thing that
Mm,
was missing was everyday people. You know, it's one thing
mm,
to have the artists in there and the fashion, but I came up with this idea of bringing my work that just represented everyday people that listen to the hip hop.
yeah.
And I'll never forget, I was in the elevator and I met a young brother who worked for the Source, Eric Russ. And I didn't have an
Mm,
appointment or anything. He just saw me with my portfolio. He said to me, he pulled me to the side and said, "What you got there?" And I said, "This is some work I want to bring to your organization in hopes that it can get published." And he looked at it and he went through a few pages. He said, "This is what we've been looking for." He says,
wow.
"You're going to be in our anniversary issue." And sure enough, like a few
Wow.
months later, I was in the anniversary issue with LL with the mics. And what was so deep about that, they gave me about 15 pages. And
Damn.
that publication, it was all local images, people from mainly Brooklyn from back in the days. That issue sold out all over New York. It sold out in
Wow.
Brooklyn because I had people in there that was everyday people. Then again, some of them weren't. I caught many people at their prime who might have dipped into that world
Wow.
and got caught up in that life. And they were
Mm,
major.
wow.
And the publication did well. I didn't know what I was doing at that time. I
Wow.
wasn't even aware of the fact that it even produced harm to people because, even with pictures of certain couples I had in the photograph that looked
Wow.
like they would be married and have 10 children, not realizing they were enemies to each other. But it was a beautiful photograph. So it was a
Wow.
bittersweet experience. It put me on the map.
Mm,
It exposed people to my work globally, but it came with some pain too because some people didn't want their pictures to be taken. And I
wow.
didn't understand it at that point because, again, the crack epidemic had hit and certain people dipped into that life. So there's people
Mm,
that had people that were after them. So it was a bittersweet experience, but more sweet than bitter. But out of respect for the people I photographed, it pained me because I didn't want to bring any harm on anybody.
right.
But it's through that publication that actually opened up the door for the production of my book back in the days in
Mm,
2001, because now it put me on the map and it produced a lot of curiosity
wow.
about my work. Because at that time, nobody was really documenting the streets like I was at that
Yeah.
point.
Yeah.
You just said if you saw a person with a camera, they were either a tourist or a
Yeah.
professional photographer, and most professional photographers weren't shooting the neighborhoods in which I was shooting. You
Yeah.
just wasn't do that. You
That's a
had to
fact.
have a connection with the people in the street,
Yeah.
and I can say that for the most part I did, and it's really manifested when you look at the work in which I have. You have to have a connection, and there's
Yeah.
not no snapshot, no sneak shots. I engage people.
Yeah.
My work, you see people looking in the camera.
Yeah.
There's an engagement. There's a conversation. There's a handshake at the end, and oftentimes I try to give people copies of the photographs, and I
Yeah.
didn't want anything in return. So I wasn't doing it for the money. I was doing it strictly to engage people, to inspire them, and as I shared earlier, to make sure our history was being preserved.
Wow. Um. Wow. Wow. Um. Wow. This was incredible. Um. I got some pictures too, man. I want to show something.
Yeah, I'll break them all down to you. Every picture is a story beyond what you can imagine.
You see this one with the telephone? Can you?
Okay, cool, cool. What made you pick that picture?
Because I like telephone booths.
I like them
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. There's something about the old school telephone booth. I'm trying to move it around. Give me 1 second. Sorry about that. Yeah, I had it on lock so you can see your face. And yeah. Yeah, man. When do you remember this photo? Because I know you have so many.
Sure. See, the idea of photographing an image like that comes from looking at a lot of photography books. Because there's different types of photography in which I do. There's the pose images that make
Mm,
up much of my work, what people know of my work, where people looking into the camera, where I'm engaging them. And then there's what you call a decisive moment. My camera is always with me. It's always out. It's set properly for any light condition. At
mm,
this particular spot here, I'm at Coney Island, and I'm
mm.
just observing everything around me. And
Wow.
I'm just looking to find something that interests me. And as I look at this book, this moment, I see diversity. You have a police
Yeah.
officer, you have a Latino male, you have a female, and you have another female. And just to position it, and the
Mm,
fact that they're in the different worlds, it just captured my eye. And I knew in the field of street photography that this is a very compelling image.
yeah.
And it pretty much speaks for itself. It doesn't really need a title, even though I call it 4 degrees of separation. It speaks pretty much for itself. And
Mm,
I like street photography. The streets is never a dull moment. When you
yeah.
travel in New York, you're always seeing things. So this is just a moment that I saw. And a lot of times with the images which I create, I say to myself, it may not make sense now, but it's going to make sense later on. And sure
Mm,
enough, it makes a lot of sense now because of the time of digital cell phones and the fact that we don't really see these phone booths anymore. So now it has become one of my iconic images
wow.
made in 1995.
Wow. I got something. I got. This was a powerful image too.
That's a very good story right here.
I love this image. This image is. Whew.
What's so profound about this photograph, maybe like 15 years earlier, I saw her on the train with her brother,
Wow.
and they were going to the mosque,
Mm,
and she was so beautiful. And she was on the train with her brother and another brother, and I was new to photography, and I don't believe I asked them could I get their picture because I knew they would probably tell me no, because a
mm,
lot of what I do is rooted in body language. But I never forgot this woman and how beautiful she was,
yeah.
and I have to get it painted because I didn't get that picture. But
Mm,
years later, she became a friend of mine,
wow.
and I was able to photograph her and her 2 sons,
Wow.
and
This is a
and that's a
great
very
picture.
powerful photograph because both her sons, I think both of them have their PhDs now.
Oh, that's crazy.
And she's a friend of mine. So imagine I saw this woman on the train, didn't know her. I just came home from the military, and I was
Wow.
apprehensive in approaching to get a picture. I knew they were going to probably tell me no, and then years later, not only would I photograph her in this particular photograph, but I will photograph her over time in other images. So that picture
Wow.
means a lot to me because I was greatly inspired by, um, how can I say this here, a photographer by the name of Leonard Freed and Gordon Parks, who
Mm,
documented the Nation of Islam. So for me, I wanted to do the same thing. I
mm.
believe in themes.
Me
So
too.
when I go out to shoot, I have different themes in mind that I want to document. And like
Mm,
Gordon Parks, I went on to document the Nation of Islam because
wow.
of its roots in this country going back in the 1930s. I wanted to continue in terms of what Gordon did.
Incredible.
Again, the trains. This is what I call rush hour. It's morning rush hour in Brooklyn, Utica Avenue, in Crown Heights. And I just saw the brother was just chilling on the train and he looked photogenic. I knew that he wouldn't tell me no. You see a brother like that, the body language is like, yo, check me out. So I knew, again, everywhere I go, my camera's out, it's at the ready, it's set with all light conditions. And when I saw him, I was able to bust off this shot and I got him to go in between train cars, and I got
Wow.
another version too. So I got him in between the cars, looking outward at me, and that went on to be one of my most iconic photographs too. And that's at a period in which I was shooting a lot of black and white in the trains. So I
That's
call that one
incredible.
rush hour.
Wow.
This is a very powerful photograph right here. This is what I call a decisive moment, and it's really interesting. You would show this photograph here. I'm at a rally in Fort Greene Park,
Mm,
and I'm observing my surroundings. I'm listening to the speakers, and I noticed that this aesthetic individual, the gentleman, is walking to these different benches, like sitting down, almost like doing playing musical chairs with the benches.
mm,
And I noticed at the same time the gentleman with the green hat sitting at the bench. So as I'm observing the speakers, I'm looking at this scenario, anticipating that something's going to happen. I got a feeling that something's going to happen here, and I'm watching this Hasidic gentleman going to like 5 different benches, just sitting for a few seconds and getting up and moving. I could tell that he was suffering some type of mental illness. So I had my camera locked, and I had the feeling, and I might have been about maybe 150 feet away, and I anticipated, and I ran to the moment, and I snapped it, and I got that shot the moment they looked at each other.
Wow.
And I call this particular photograph WTF.
Wow.
It's 2 titles I give it. That's the hard title, WTF, because that's the expression that I felt, and on the looks on their face. But on a more sophisticated level, I created a series called When Two Worlds Meet.
Wow.
And that's the more scholarly title, When Two Worlds Meet. So that was one of my most recent photographs. Unlike the ones from the 80s, this one was probably made around maybe 2012.
Wow. Oh, I seen that one. Okay.
Again, the trains. I look for that spirit of love, and you can't go wrong when you see friends and sisters. And so best friends is like a theme of mine. It's always good that when you go out, you have themes in your mind. So when you're traveling, when you see that theme, you know how to approach it. And it's just something about 2 people that really work well. I like to approach people and help them see what it is I'm trying to capture. It's always one thing to hear you, but when they're able to conceptualize what is you're saying, it works a lot better with them. And these are women I didn't know. It's just a result of traveling from train car to train car, looking for subjects. And again, the lighting was always good, and I made it fun. The posing was another element to my creative process, because oftentimes you might get a person that agrees to want their picture taken, but they don't know what to do. So now it's incumbent upon you to come up with different poses and to make it fun at the same time. And then, as I stated earlier, you look at the background, you see all those graffiti tags of different people that add to the photograph. Because I can look at somebody, I can share this photograph with somebody and say, yo, that's my cousin Tito over there. Wait a minute, Tito, there's 2 girls in the picture. But he's talking about the tag on the door. So I'm glad, again, that I had an opportunity to incorporate that, unbeknownst to me, in a lot of my images on the train.
Wow. Another dope one.
Yeah, this is one I actually just rediscovered not too long ago, because there's certain photographs I forgot about, and I think in going through my negatives, I happened to find this photograph. Back in the days, Reese Beach in Queens is like a popular a beach spot that we used to go to, and I just happened to see these 3 brothers that were clean, and I approached them, and I was able to capture this moment right here. I can't believe I did it. When I look back at my journey, I can't believe that I would approach strangers and just convince them to stand in front of my camera. It's something I can't really do now. The idea doesn't even exist, but back then it's just something I felt the need to do, to engage people and help them understand the importance of what I've done. Unfortunately, with these 3 gentlemen, I've never seen them ever again. So it's my hopes that through my social media feed, they would either reach out to me or their children. And a lot of times it's the children reach out to me saying, yo, that's my father. And they give me even deeper backstory to who these people are. Because a lot of times I don't know I don't know where they came from. They look like they might be from Brooklyn, but you never know.
Yeah.
So, one of the reasons why, like I said, having a Facebook and Instagram feed gives me a space to share them in hopes of me reconnecting. It's such a wonderful feeling, too, to find out who these people are after all of these years, brother. It gives it even greater clarity on why we met. And to hear so many of the success stories. I have people I photographed that went on to be professors at prominent universities. Some went on to be doctors and lawyers, So there's a lot of good stories that go with the bad stories. And I think it's a pretty even balance between two.
Wow. This one is crazy right here. This one was.
And that was just timing. I used to have a spot in Brooklyn on Flatbush and Church Avenue, which is a major conduit in the heart of the neighborhood. and it created me. It was this is in front of a known church that's been around since the 1800s. I believe it's
Wow.
a Quaker church, and that used to be my spot right on the avenue because everyone had to come, through it. And I had a nice brick wall I used as a background, and I saw these little shorties one day, and I
Wow.
just snatched them up and said, I got to get a picture, of y'all, and they
This was
gave it to me.
incredible.
They gave it to me, and
That
just
was
recently, three of them had reached out. It was shared
wow.
on a social media feed, and all four of them are still around right now. I would absolutely love to see them today and photograph them on them same steps. So one of the things I'm,
That
I'm
would be
working on is
crazy.
to do it then and now. To
Yo, that
find
was a good idea.
that would be incredible
Yeah,
because
that's a
these guys
great
now are
idea.
probably in their late 40s. Imagine that to see them today.
That
So
would
that's the
be
project I'm
dope.
working on.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Wow. Look at this fly sister right here.
I love fashion,
Me too.
so when the idea of doing fashion shoots came into play, I wanted to make it as authentic to my style as possible. So I would take to the trains. And this is a shoot I did for a publication, I believe, called Black Book Magazine. And
Wow.
it's one of the first magazine gigs that I got. And they wanted me to shoot in my style. Keisha was one of the models, and she was an up and coming model at that time. This was done in 2000, and I posed her up and tried to make it look as realistic as possible, using the train as my landscape. And she gave it to me, and it went on to be
Wow.
another classic photograph. So, fashion. What I like about fashion is that it allows me time to slow down and create.
Mm.
Unlike those spontaneous moments where I see somebody in motion, I'm able to
Oh.
convince them for a few minutes and they're going. Having models is like having soft clay. They're
Mm.
professional models. They there to give you what you want. So with this vision, I was able to photograph her throughout the day and
Wow.
create a series of very powerful images with her and a number of other models. So this was taken down in Soho, and it's a really classic photograph of her at her prime.
Wow.
Wow. Uh, in the spirit of documentary photographer James Van Der Zee, who is best known to have documented the Harlem's Renaissance, I was greatly inspired by his work from that time period. So I spent a lot of time in Harlem.
Mm.
This particular event is the African American Day Parade, one of the largest African American parades in the country.
Mm.
And I've been documenting for a number of years. And at this particular event, I saw this gentleman, Grand Master Freemason,
Wow.
and I just saw the historic relevance of capturing him. At that time, the theme of mine was honor and dignity, and he
Mm.
exemplified that in this image. So,
Definitely
I
did.
approached him, engaged him, he agreed, and I was able to freeze this moment in time, and it went on to be a very iconic
Wow.
photograph that has been published in an Aperture publication, Aperture magazine, under the title of Vision and Justice.
Wow.
So again, it's my way of capturing dignity amongst our people, in from the various fraternal organizations.
That was incredible.
This is a very powerful photograph too of the early 1980s, a time before crack. And these are young brothers and sisters in Harlem on their way to a rally. And
Wow.
again, I like to use the urban landscape as a backdrop. It's one thing to photograph them in the street, but as I'm looking around to create an image, again, in the spirit of James Van Der Zee, who oftentimes used the steps as a backdrop, I position them from the street and put them on the steps and posed
Wow.
them. And I caught this particular moment right here. And it says a lot because you have women who have long skirts on. Back in that day and time, women were very modest, and it wasn't about showing what you had.
Right.
They were educated to understand that it's about the mind. And oftentimes men are drawn towards your body. So if you have your jeans on, they're looking at your physical and they're not getting a chance to get into your mind. So when you cover it up, they can't see what you have. And then they got to come at you
Mm.
at a different level. So back in the early days, it was very popular to see women dressed as we call this three-fourths, because three-fourths of their body is covered. And you have to
Mm.
come at them from a different perspective. And they refer to themselves as queens. and you
Wow.
see the men are elevated above them, manifesting really protection.
Right.
We are protecting our women. Back then, it was a mantra: protect and respect Black women,
Wow.
and that's something that people held true. And then the crack epidemic came, and everything changed. So this
Wow.
is a popular style. This is a style of my work too. I actually did a whole series called Home Fronts, where I photographed people on steps of the establishments.
Wow.
Love and mothers and daughters and fathers and sons is another uh, ongoing theme of mine. And I find that, when you have a woman who's fashionably dressed and she has a child with her and you approach her right, she would be open to let you photograph her. So
Wow.
it's about that engagement now. Excuse me, sister, with all due respect, I'm a photographer and I see
Hmm.
you with your beautiful daughter. May I take a photograph of you? Here's my business card. If you let me photograph you, I'll have your picture in a couple of days. So I always carry the business card with me, and I
Hmm.
always strove to be sincere. This picture was taken downtown Brooklyn. That was like my nucleus back then. Being it was a major conduit in Brooklyn. It was we called the head of Brooklyn. All trains stopped downtown Brooklyn. It was that major shopping area.
Hmm.
So being down there was like almost like being a fisherman. I'll be out there with my camera, loaded with film, position myself in front of the famed Albee Square Mall,
Yeah.
and photograph different people coming and going. And she just
Wow.
happened to be one of those young women that I met. I would ideally love to see her today and her daughter. And
Wow.
again, it's more than likely her daughter will reach out to me, who's probably about in her 30s right now.
Wow. Wow.
Twins.
Oh
You can
wow.
identify with them. Twins was the theme I had early on. And these are very interesting sisters, Edie and Evelyn. And they went to my former high school. And they were
Wow.
really like my first models. And the fact that they were twins and they were fly,
Yeah.
they they allowed me to photograph them early on, back in the 80s, and I would reconnect with them in the 2000s. And they came out of Fort Greene projects. They were
Wow.
Latino. This is when I first met them, actually. Pretty much when I first came home from the Army, I decided to go back to my local high school
Mm.
because a lot of the students there were like my partner's little brothers and sisters. So I knew them.
Mm.
So it was easier to engage them at that point. And on this
Wow.
particular day, I had just met these young women. And they allowed me to capture this image that will go on to be one of my most iconic photographs. And it represents love. Because again,
Wow.
when I get people who to pose, I might say, well, put your arm around your sister, show some love.
Mm.
So that capturing that emotion was very important to me.
Wow. That was incredible. Look at them with their gazelles on. All right now.
Hmm.
Look at these brothers.
Again, the trains and the graffiti, and
Incredible.
it's just that moment, just traveling and just seeing different people and just approaching them. I
Wow.
still can't believe I was doing all that back then, but it worked.
Wow. Another great picture. Let me see if I got any more. Oh yeah.
Yeah, this is one of my recent images right here. This is for a campaign for Lee Jeans. They had reached
Wow.
out to me in London, and Lee Rock is a young brother who believes in the old school.
Yeah.
He embraces that whole history and culture, that time period, and he's like a walking 80s person, and everything about him.
Wow.
So I was already seeing these guys, on social media, and I decided they would be really perfect for this shoot because they were just doing it to be doing it. I said, let me incorporate them in this photo shoot so they can make money too, to
Yeah.
gain popularity and gain money.
Yeah.
And it really worked out for them. And I took them to my old neighborhood and I photographed them. Of course, the
Wow.
boombox worked. The fact that his name is Lee Rock worked with the Lee Jeans.
Wow.
And what really was beautiful about this is that Lee, the company Lee, took them overseas. And I don't think they had traveled before. So it was really a win for them to get some spotlight, to be a part of a major campaign, get some currency in their pocket, and travel.
Wow.
And they became a sensation. I believe they traveled to France or the UK, and they became very
Wow.
popular. So one of the things I try to do with models I photograph, I try to give them opportunity,
Yeah.
you know, to get them to help launch their career. If you want to be a model, let me help you become a model. Let me give you that assistance to perhaps get you where you need to go to on your career path. And he was one of them. And he's continuing to do well right now. So him doing a campaign for Lee Jeans really helped his career.
Wow. Wow.
This went on to be a very popular photograph of mine. It took me years before I really saw the relevance of it. I had it lingering around, and it never really made any of my books in a big way. And I call this one Rush Hour 2.
Yeah. Wow.
Window is my frame. And I spoke about earlier how I shot both on the train, but also the platform. And that image really represents me utilizing the available light and capturing that defining moment on the train.
Wow.
And that went on to be like a really classic photograph. And it graces the cover of my latest book called City Metro.
Oh, wow. Wow. These brothers here, boy.
Yeah, that's a very powerful photograph there. Those are very legendary brothers from Fort Greene.
Yeah.
And I would see them often downtown Brooklyn, and they were official in every sense of the word. And again, when you see an image like that, and you know brothers like that, they clean. They know they clean.
Yeah.
They don't mind being photographed because they know that they're clean.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I just happened to capture that moment right there. And that's how a lot of brothers were back in the days. You know, they were official. This is before the crack epidemic, and they were very serious. You know, these are young men. And unlike the young men of today, they were very mature.
Yeah. Wow. One more. I got one more.
And this is a picture I didn't really like a lot, but it's a moment. And normally I would never show it because I never wanted to show anything that appeared to be negative. You know, and it's a reality at the same time, but it could be misconstrued. Where you have two Hispanic men and one has a joint out of his mouth. You got the graffiti in the background. You know, it was that moment, and I knew it was a great image, and it's one that probably won't make any of my books because I just don't want to. Despite the fact that people could look past that and say, "Yo, homie got a joint in his mouth. He got the boombox with tape, you know, to hold the barriers in place. Even the graffiti tags in the back, the train they riding on." So it's a picture that a lot of people like, but it's one that I will never consider a favorite. You know, I don't want to degrade anybody or have images that are not really positive. So it's just one I always considered all right. That it could be in one of my portfolios, but it's one that if ever given the opportunity to show it, I would decline. That cannot be an exhibition. It just can't. And that's just me.
No,
I don't want to misrepresent one I photograph.
No,
Regardless of how unshot it is, I just don't want to do that. That's just me.
I get it. All right, but one more before we head on. I gotta show this one. This is like one of my favorites.
That's like my iconic photograph right there. That's taken in the Brownsville section of Brooklyn in 1982. And it's when I'm really beginning to get a grip on photography. It's beyond the basic pointing a camera and getting an image. Photography is a science. It's about understanding light and speed. And when you're able to understand and to put those two elements together, you can make an image. So within this photograph, you're dealing with a few situations. You have a moment. You know, you have this old beat up mattress that took me back to my youth of coming up in Brooklyn and how we would play in the mattress. So I'm immediately going back to my youth. So I'm anticipating something magical is going to happen. So I positioned myself there for a while.
Wow.
And now they're performing for me. And I was able to get off 3 frames. I had my camera set, you know, and I just, everything was set right. Because if your camera's not set right, if the shutter speed is not set right, it's going to be blur. If the aperture is not set right, it could be either light or dark. So you had to have that balance. I had to make sure my speed was right, my lighting was right. And I just anticipated. I knew something special was going to happen. And I bust off 3 frames. And I went on to capture this image that would go on to be one of my most iconic photographs ever. It would go on to be be on the album of the Roots, the Undone album, and of course it graced the cover of my book, Seconds of My Life.
Yeah.
And this is a picture that I feel good about because that's when I start to really embrace photography as a craft. I'll never forget taking it home and showing my father once it was processed, and he gave it the thumbs up of approval. And at that point, he realized that I was on a really good path because I'm taking photography to another level right now. Again, it's
Mm.
easy to take a portrait of people on the train and all that, but when you can capture motion like this, it shows that you understand what this craft is about.
Mm. Wow. Um, that was wonderful. I really thank you for going through all those photos like that. I felt this was a treat for me.
You're welcome,
I'll
no
think about
problem.
this for a long time. I
All right,
really
my pleasure.
appreciate this. Wow.
No
I
problem.
felt like I was in a like I got a private expedition just now, man. Damn, man, that
It's
was dope.
I
Thank you,
appreciate you
man.
pulling up images too. Thank you, bro. I appreciate you
Thank you,
pulling them up.
man.
You're
Um,
welcome.
when you come out with the a time before crack revisited, please stop by, man. And I
Sure.
definitely want to come and buy that book from you in person,
All
autograph
right.
book in person. I want to come see you and get that book in person, man. Anything that you want to drop on any of the audience that want to do like following your footpaths and or try to do some of the things, want to become a photographer and probably want to do some of the things that you've done or take it to the next level. Any advice you want to give to the young people?
Well, I think the key is to get a sense of purpose in life, to try to find out why you here. Everybody's put on this
Mm,
planet for a reason. Understand what is your purpose in life. And if you embrace photography, it's not a bad craft to have. You
mm,
should definitely have a 9 to 5 job because you're not going to make a lot of money as a photographer if
right.
you just go into it for that purpose. But I'll say, find out. This is a time to start thinking about what is my purpose in life. What do I
Mm,
want my legacy to be? You know what I mean? It's time to start thinking about that. And
mm,
I feel it's very important that people preserve their family history.
mm,
So if you are fortunate to have a mother, a father, family members, learn as much history as you can about your family. It's a
mm,
coming upon generations being passed on that important history. Very
wow.
vital to know history. It's very important to interview your elders, your family members. And I know in a lot of families, there's a lot of tension, conflict going on. But if you
Mm,
can get past it and speak to some of the elders in your family, especially this time of COVID where people are dying,
yeah.
a lot of history is being lost. So
Mm,
we need all hands on deck right now. You know what I mean? And
mm,
on a larger scale, what I tell people, because it's bigger than photography with me,
yeah.
I'm looking for healers. The world right
Mm,
now needs healers. And
yeah.
I think people who are best fit to be those healers are the artists,
Mm,
poets, the photographers, the painters, the musicians, the writers.
mm,
We need all hands on deck right now.
yeah.
Politicians and religious leaders have failed.
Wow.
Art is a gift and it's a global language. If we
Mm,
use it properly in terms of, in addition to understand our purpose in life, we can
mm,
make the world a better place by tapping into things that might bother you. It
yeah.
could be bullying, it could be racism,
Wow.
it could be crime, it could be pollution, it could
Mm,
be animal rights, it could be human rights. Use your camera or your platform, your artistic ability to try to make the world a better place. And when you do that,
mm,
blessings come your way. We are living in a very challenging time, and I know it's not really easy,
yeah. It is.
but you got to take time and you got to strengthen yourself because it's hard out there.
Mm,
It's about building support systems, you know what I mean, and
yeah.
and being around people who are going to inspire you. It's very important right now. So I say to
Wow.
those who are listening, hang in there. And
Mm,
everybody's been given a gift. It's very important that you find out what that gift is. For
mm,
me, it happened to be the photography.
wow.
And I took it to the next level beyond just photography. How can I use this global language to affect change? So if you
Mm,
go to my Instagram feed, besides posting photographs every now and then,
mm,
what's more important for me to post are inspirational quotes to give
mm,
people hope. That means a lot to me because I have over 135,000 people following me. So
mm.
if I could put something inspirational on, you'll
Wow.
never know how somebody might pick up on that and use that to improve their life, or they may be going through something right now. So I
Mm,
say to people, hang in there and be strong and try to find your purpose. And sometimes you got to travel the road less traveled. I've always done.
mm,
I never rode in a crowd. I knew a lot of people, but I
mm,
traveled solo. I believe in rolling like the ego. I
mm,
fly solo. And at the same time, when I connect with people, I try to elevate everybody. That
Mm.
mantra, each one teach one, is very real.
Yeah.
I'm trying to impart whatever I have to the next person,
Yes.
just like it was given to me. So
Mm.
it's important again to understand your purpose in life. We got to
Wow.
take a moment to pause and say, what is my purpose in life? It's very important also
Mm.
to have goals and objectives.
Yeah.
If you don't have goals and objectives, you don't have a sense of direction and purpose. So
Mm.
we got to take a moment to pause and think about that. One of
Yeah.
the greatest gifts that were given to me in terms of wisdom was have goals.
Yes.
And I start to have goals. I have daily goals, weekly goals, monthly goals, yearly goals. You
Mm.
know what I mean? But I have goals, and I strive to the best of my ability to achieve those goals every day.
Wow.
But those who are involved in photography, carry your camera everywhere you go, even if
Mm.
it's your cell phone. Document your journey. It's good to have a record of your existence. You
Mm.
never know what it's going to mean later on in life. Even if you just do it for you.
Mm.
I'm never without memory.
Mm.
In this time that we live in now, of really being somewhat on lockdown, I mean, things have shifted a lot.
Yeah.
But if I want to go back to Brooklyn, I have thousands upon thousands of pictures to look at to take me back. If I want to go to
Mm.
Coney Island, I can go to Coney Island. If I want to go to Times Square, I can go back to Times Square because I documented all that. So I'm never without memory. So it's important
Mm.
that we preserve our history and culture and memories, and start off with our family. Again, I know that there's problems within the family,
Mm.
and you may not get along with certain family members, but it's important that the ones that you do get along with, document them.
Right.
Document them both through your camera, through your video camera. Because one thing that we have today in society, everyone for the most part has a cell phone, and within that
Mm.
cell phone, it has both photographic and video capabilities.
Right. That's right.
Use that to document some positive. All
Mm.
too often, I'm seeing the negative. I'm
Yeah.
seeing the fights. You know what I mean? And you see two girls fighting, and people just want to videotape it, put it on a
Yeah.
wall, don't break it up. And it saddens me that we're seeing all this negativity because that negativity is going all over the world. And it's
Mm.
reality at the same time, but we don't realize that we are documenting this visual poison, and it's being shown everywhere, and it's producing a certain thought process.
Mm. Hello? I don't know what happened. It froze. I don't know what just happened. It froze on his side. Hopefully he comes back. He was dropping science. I really enjoyed this episode. Jamel Shabazz. Hopefully he comes back on. Can you hear me, brother?
I can hear you loud and clear. Can you hear me?
Yes. All right. He's back. All
Okay, I
right.
can hear you.
Yeah.
But think about it. You got a person that wants to jump in front of a train,
Mm.
and people encourage that person to jump in front of the train because they want to get it on video. You know what I
Mm.
mean? So we become very desensitized in society, and we have to learn to be empathetic. Empathy is very important. You know what I mean? Because if you're empathetic, you're not going to think on a level like that. So
Yeah.
let us try to be better people, and let us try to make the world a better place. I know it's hard. It's never been harder than it is today. But everyone can make a difference if you desire to want to make a difference. We have
Yes.
to make the world a better place because it's so full of hate right now. And it's
Mm.
going to only get worse. It's not going to get better.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean? We have to start with the man in the mirror.
Mm.
To look in the mirror and say to yourself, I need to be a better person. What can I do to change and be
Mm.
better? And sometimes we have to start with our family. And again, that's complicated.
Mm.
But your little brother, your little sister, you gotta try to keep the family together because we're dealing with a lot of spiritual warfare right now, and we're dealing with a
Mm.
lot of death and post-traumatic stress behind all the things that we're seeing.
Mm.
A lot of us know low people have been murdered who are suffering trauma, and it's just a really bad time that we live in it.
Mm.
And we have to try to be better and make a difference in this world here. I live for that every day. I
Mm.
want my legacy to be known as one that try to make the world a better place through his media. I don't want to be
Mm.
known as a photographer. I don't even want to be known as a photographer. I want to be
Mm.
known as a good brother to try to make a difference in this really mean world.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're doing a great job. I really all your work has inspired me, and I'm just glad that you were able to come on and bless me with all this knowledge, man, and this information. I really appreciate it. Um, where can they find your work at? Where can they find you if they want to buy any of your books? And where can they find you on social media?
Well, Instagram is the best place to be honest with you. I got
Okay.
my, that's the place. It's a lot on there. a lot of images. There's short videos. I post almost every day on it, so I think that's the really best place to go.
Okay.
I do have my Facebook page. I don't really post a lot on there. I have my personal page, but I think IG is the place.
Okay.
The books is easy. You go to Amazon, you can get the books.
Okay.
I tell people to stay tuned for A Time Before Crack. That book is going to drop probably in the late fall.
Okay.
It's one that you definitely want to get. If I'm having an exhibition in Brooklyn on June 18th in Prospect Park.
Oh, I'll be there.
It's an outdoor exhibition. It's a very important one to me because that park is close to my heart. So on June 18th, that show will be up for about 6 months.
Okay.
And once the book drops, I like to come back on the show and I'll take you through the book. I'll take you through the pages of the book and the writings.
Okay.
And we can get it in that way. So, I'll make sure, brother, that happens. You get a copy. You be one of the first ones to get a signed copy of that book when it drops.
I really appreciate that, and I will be there June 18th too. Thank you, my brother.
Are you on Instagram?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram.
Okay, very good, brother. So, man, it's been a pleasure speaking to you, brother.
Thank you.
I appreciate everything that you're doing, and I thank you for reaching out to me. I couldn't resist it when you told me that you couldn't get brothers to come on. I said, yo, I got this. That's why even yesterday, I got caught up on so much and I forgot. But I said, you know what? I'm a man of my word. So I'm going to make it a point where we got to go through a plan B. So I'm glad that it worked out this evening. We had an opportunity to have this exchange.
Well, you heard it here first. Jamel Shabazz is coming out with a new book called A Time Before Crack Revisited. We out. Peace and love, everyone.
All right. Peace.
Peace.
All right.